Hello, everyone. Can you hear me today? Let's see. Yes, you can. Awesome.
Sound check. Sound check.
Today, today we're trying again what we tried and failed to do a couple of months back, which was talking about live edit with Alan and Leland. So, can you guys please introduce yourselves so I can actually check if people can hear you?
Hi.
One sec. It says no guest audio. Okay, that's fixed. I knew
That's
it.
perfect.
I knew it.
I love this.
Fixed now.
Audio.
I knew it. It should be fine now.
You want to go again, Leland?
So I'll go again.
Sorry, Leland.
Someone will let me know if it worked this time. Yeah, so my name is Leland Richardson, and I work on Compose at Google. Been on the stream a few times. Good to be back. And yeah, Alan, you want to?
Yeah, so my name is Alan Leung. I work on the Android Studio deployment team. This is my first time on this chat, and before this, I was also working on Chrome for Android, for those who are curious.
Chrome. I'm gonna ask many questions. Okay, so today, as we said, we're gonna be talking about live edit. It's a super interesting topic. There's a lot of history behind it, but also there's a lot of technical details that we're here to learn. We are going to be wrapping up in about an hour, 20 minutes, because then I have to run after we finish, unfortunately, today.
Hashtag responsibilities.
Yeah, I know.
Hashtag
Owning a
adult.
house sucks. I mean, it's awesome, but also sucks at the same time. Ivan, all
Yes.
yours.
So let's keep it very short because plenty of links are gonna come to the chat. If you want to support the show, there's plenty of opportunity for you. You can buy the t-shirt. This is the OG t-shirt, so you
Wow.
can't buy this anymore. You can buy the new version that is way cooler because this is by Sebastiano and the new one is by Virginia. So I mean, seriously, so you can support us with Amazon Prime. If you have an account, you can connect it to your Twitch and you can subscribe for free on every month, so you can support us with it's like $1 or something. So everything goes into the fund and the budget that we use to create stickers that then we can send you over giveaways that we do during the show. You can also subscribe as a subscription to coffee, and you can buy also stickers and gadgets like the pin there or the keychain there. Everything is very, very, very pizza angry branded and supports the show, and basically we just buy and send you stuff. So that's that's the gist of it. So thank you. Let's go.
Did you notice that Mark requested you speak Spanish?
Oh, okay. No, I didn't because I was reading the notes. So I want to keep this very, very short. Elivano now has step up the game because Sebastiano is a disturbed person. So this is my Christmas present. Just can you see it? Look at the beauty. So it's very subtle. It's a very nice piece of home decor that now lives in my house. Thank you, Sebastiano, for this. Gracias, Sebastiano. Thank you. Let's go.
Great. Okay. That was fun. Let's start from the basics. Well, obviously, people, if you have questions, just put them in the Slido, and we're gonna get to them later, so we can ask Leland and Alan about them. Now, folks, let's go back a few years and why do we have live edit today? What happened to the other things that we had before?
I think I can take this one. So So most people will probably know we have. Let's start with the very, very beginning. We had Instant Run, right?
Yeah.
For those who remember, it's probably people probably remember it because that's the first thing you kind of disable when you have Android Studio installed.
Yes.
So
It's brutal,
we
but
learned
correct.
it's also funny because I can say this because that was before I joined the team, so I'm okay to make fun of it. So jokes aside, so we learned a lot of things from Instant Run. There are a lot of lessons. There's a lot of bugs that we noticed that we should have noticed ahead of time. So when I joined, my first project was actually think of a way to fix it. And apply changes was kind of the solution for that. It replaces basically the instant run kind of mentality of we're gonna do everything for you. Instead, we're gonna rely on the user to make a lot of the choices. And on top of that, instead of solely doing our own thing, we work closely with the art team, the Android runtime kind of the device team to add capabilities to the VM to allow us to do dynamic changes to the running device, and that actually worked really well. And turns out it's a little harder to use, but once you get the hang of it, apply changes is actually much more consistent compared to instant run. And it's still pretty being used pretty often today. I think 1 out of every 20 run is actually apply changes. People have not disabled apply changes as of today. And that kind of fast forward to like couple like two years ago, we were thinking we got this, really cool technology that would allow us to make changes to the running application on the device. And what exactly could we do with it? And that kind of comes in when we started looking into integrating with Compose. And then one of the very first thing that the Android Studio team did with Compose is something called Live Literal. It was more the Leland side of side of things, and he kind of brought out that idea, and I'm kind of the one that worked on implementing that on Android Studio. So we did that, and while I was doing this, my director, Tor, keep asking me, so we can have this thing called Live Literal, where it allows you to update primitives. Can you actually update more than primitive? So he constantly harassed me on it, and I keep brushing him aside until it got really annoying, and I set out a couple of weeks, and I want to write a design doc and telling him that is impossible right now. We cannot do this. So I started out looking at all these ideas. I've been talking to like the VM team. I talked to Leland, of course. We bounced idea off each other, and it started to look like it's possible. We can do something, and that change the running application on the fly and use Compose to kind of help us to refresh whatever it needs to be refreshed on the screen. So that's where we're at. Once we got to like a working prototype, and we have a feeling, hey, this is something that's going to be useful, and really, we're kind of excited at that point, and it just went from here. Leland, do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a few things to touch on. So one is to understand that Compose kind of changes a few things that are really important for this type of technology. And one is just like the programming paradigm itself. The Compose sort of style of programming is such that you write code that is resistant to it running kind of multiple times, right? So all of your composable functions are built so that whenever something changes, it just gets executed again. And so when you write code in that style, it's really amenable to this sort of idea that like, well, when something changed, let's just go through that machinery and update everything. And instead of the actual state changing, in this case, it's just the code that changed that you wrote. And in some ways that sounds great. In other ways, the way we design Compose kind of like actively tries to sabotage that whole idea, because a lot of the way we actually generate code is like all of it, all the optimizations we do and everything is all under the assumption that the code isn't going to change from under us. And so we kind of had to think about, okay, we have this way Compose works, and the programming style that you use is really amenable to this type of thing, but the way we implement it is really not. So how do we like kind of meet somewhere in the middle? And so there was a lot of really great kind of investigations that led to this current approach. And it's important to understand that this is actually, it's done very differently from live literals. So live literals was kind of I mean, we can kind of explain how it works, but it was much easier to do because we essentially, like, if you want to think about it this way, is like we replaced all primitives with those and generated code as if you had written them as mutable states, and then we kind of update those values when you update them in the editor. And so that works, but like it really just works for literals. And when you start doing other things, like changing the actual structure of the code, all bets are off. And so the way that live edit works is completely different, and it actually is like better in pretty much every single way. So like once we kind of get live literals to, or once we get live edit to a place that we're really happy with, there's no need for live literals anymore. It does everything live literals does and quite a bit more. Yeah. So anyway, that's my sugar on top of what Alan said.
So a lot of history, a lot of progress, but my question now is, I want to know how it works. Like, what's the magic that makes it work, and why wasn't it possible before Compose? Because I imagine that otherwise it would have been done ages ago, right?
So it was possible because Alan was not on the team.
Also that, yeah. But Chrome on Android was amazing.
So the magic, I think it all started out with a lot of discovery, a lot of things we learned from working with Android Studio and the Kotlin compiler. I want this. I want Live Little to feel like it's a real-time application, meaning that you are typing and you're seeing things right away. And the kind of initial idea was, hey, what if we update the application, at some sort of AST. So we would send the Kotlin, the AST over to the device and let the device deal with it. That way we don't have to compile. So compiling Kotlin takes a lot of time, and it does not look like, running a compiler does not feel like a real-time application. But we looked into it, and Kotlin is just a really huge language. It has a lot of language feature. And for us to kind of re-implement, basically Kotlin script on Android devices is very difficult. And it's going to run into a lot of bugs, and it's going to have a lot of discrepancy with the kind of implementation on the reference implementation. That's what I meant. So we look at other ways. So can we generate other form of bytecode, and so we can send on the device? We've thought about sending DEX file over the device because given that the runtime right now has the ability to update running classes with new DEX file. That's what apply changes use. So we tried that. We didn't get the performance we wanted. There's two reasons. First thing is, in order to get the DEX code, we would need to both compile with Kotlin and also the DEX compiler D8. And on the device side, we would need the running application and the runtime to reload the DEX file. And that usually takes around 200 or 500 milliseconds. That still doesn't feel like real time to us. So what happened is we kind of met in the middle. So instead of doing purely DEX file or purely AST, we do something that is right in the middle. We would send over this thing that somewhat resemble a class file and have the device both interpret part of the part of the class file and also kind of reload part of the application with a new updated DEX. The mechanism is really tricky. It's kind of difficult for me to explain it on live right now.
Sounds like dark magic.
Yeah, there is a lot of dark magic. I do plan of maybe writing a blog post later on. Maybe talk about some of these, or maybe some random documentation. But to kind of summarize how the dark magic works is, we would use some of the apply changes power to change how the runtime deal with certain classes that you modified. And if you modified a file in your Android Studio editor, we would use the Kotlin compiler plugin to quickly generate something that would look like a class file and send it over to the device. And the device is handled with all the trampoline to mostly interpret some of the class file as the application needs. And that's how we magically are able to kind of live update the running application.
Mm-hmm.
The next trick is, now that you have your code updated, how do we know? How do we figure out what needs to be withdrawn and what needs to be refreshed? We don't want the whole application kind of have to restart all the time, and that doesn't feel live. And Leland's probably better at kind of explaining that part of the magic.
Yeah. So the general gist here is that we are able to figure out which functions changed, and if they changed, we basically created a new mechanism in the runtime for us to kind of invalidate that whole section, that whatever that composable function created in the UI. And we do it different than sort of traditional invalidation. Like if you mutate a state object, that will also invalidate that function, but it assumes that the code sort of has the same structure. Mm-hmm. In this case, we invalidate it in a way where we kind of assume that the code could be anything. And that has some limitations because we, for that function and below, we basically lose state. But the difference is with like versus restarting the whole thing, everything above that function, we keep the state. And this might be, I mean, so this is definitely a limitation, but it avoids a whole sort of class of complexity that that's very difficult to get right. But having the state that's sort of above the thing that you edited is actually like, it gets you most of the way that you like really want to get. One of the big problems early on when we didn't have this capability was like, if you're editing some composable function, if you're using like Compose to do navigation, for instance, and you have to redo the whole application, you lose also the navigation state and all the other state that your app had built up to that point. And so at least in this case, the things above you are not lost. And so if you kind of navigate to a screen and then you start editing that screen, it should just be the stuff that you're editing that kind of gets recomposed and state gets lost. The other aspect is that like a lot of times there's more sort of recomposable scopes than you might initially think. Like a lot of Compose, you nest a lot of lambdas in order to create this sort of hierarchy, and all of those lambdas are restartable scopes as well. And so even if you declared state in the same function, if you're editing something like down that function, then the state, if the state was sort of declared and initialized above it, there's a good chance that you won't lose that state. And so it actually ends up working pretty well. And so this is like kind of the current strategy that does a pretty good job. And there's like, some plans to maybe do a bit more than this and continue kind of pushing the envelope of like what we can do safely. But we want to make sure that whatever we do, we don't create a situation where basically you don't trust the changes that you see. Mm-hmm. Like we want to avoid a situation where you make an edit and you see the screen update, but then you're like, but would that normally happen? Like, should I do a full reload just to check? And so if you don't trust that the tool is giving you an accurate representation, then you kind of lose a lot of the value of the tool. And so we're trying to be very careful with the kind of the edge cases and making sure that we're thoughtful about what kind of new things we enable.
So in the case of the keeping the state of the parent, that might mean something like you have a very simple composable where the function is the smallest restartable scope that you have. If you have a parameter that comes in that's kept, and it's only the contents of the function that gets recomposed and validated, right? Or not? I'm just trying to check if I'm following.
Yeah, so if you edited a composable function, then it would, and like, let's say there's no other sort of scopes going on. Mm-hmm. It should just be that composable function that recomposes.
Yeah. And so I guess that from a user perspective, like I didn't know, for example, that until now that the scope, like the state is kept up to the parent scope of where I am. It makes sense when you say it, but I didn't think of it. So how do you communicate this to user? How do you make it like clearer that sure, you might have lost some state in some smaller part of the UI, say an animation that was ongoing or something like that, but not the global state. And like, how do you help people form the mental model of saying, oh yeah, that's fine, but that's what we can get right now is this. Because I can imagine that if someone sees something weird changing in a smaller scope, they might think, oh, if that's changed, like if that's lost a state, maybe something else has as well. And I know this is more of a UX question.
Well, I mean, UX is pretty important when it comes to tools like this. And we're doing a lot of UX studies as well to kind of try and understand how, like, what is scary to people when they use this tool, and what are the things that are confusing, and what is hard for them to wrap their head around in terms of like how this is working. And I don't think it's too important to give people like deep technical knowledge about how this all works, but they should be able to kind of understand, like before they make the edit, they should have a rough idea of what's going to happen when they do make the edit. And I don't know, I can't think, like the particular case you're describing, I haven't really seen as a problem personally. I think a lot of times, like when like people don't even think about the fact that the state above them didn't change, it's just what they wanted to happen, so like they're happy about it.
So the mental model just happens to work out the right way with the way that things are implemented, which is nice. It's
I think so. I mean, Alan, I don't know if you feel different, but I can't think of a case where people were like, oh, did that, like, basically people tend to only get mad when the state above them changes and not get mad when it doesn't. So that's sort of the only thing I've really observed. But
Yeah, I agree with you, Leland. It's as long as people see those changes, they're fine, and there are like we still to put it this bluntly, like nobody have done anything like this before on that. So we're open to suggestions and other feature requests. But we thought about this a little bit, at least for these really weird edge cases where we might need to recompose the whole thing. So in Android Studio, we have we're I don't know if we have or have not. We plan to kind of send a notification to like a slight warning on the live edits bubble, telling people, hey, what you did just now actually trigger a kind of full screen withdrawal. But no, I don't. At least from all the user study we have found, we have not seen anybody actually want to see, exactly which composable got withdrawn. As long as you got the mental model of as I type, my app gets updated. I think most people are happy.
yeah, and one of the things that Alan's kind of alluding to, which is maybe an important thing to spell out, is like there's like at the end of the day, the feature is you make some changes, you want to see the changes, like how that impacts your app, and there's kind of varying levels of like immediacy that we can do that with, and like best case scenario is like we do the sort of the magical live edit bit, right, which is where we essentially ship the class file like thing over to the device, and it invalidates the right scopes in Compose, and then it essentially runs that code interpreted, and only the things that you changed get invalidated, and that's like the happiest path, so to speak. But like I mentioned, there's kind of we want to make sure that we're like pretty conservative and people have trust in the feature, and so one of the ways that we're doing that is whenever there's a situation where we're not 100% confident that we can safely do that, we kind of step up a level and we say, okay, instead of just invalidating those little pieces, we're going to rerun the whole UI hierarchy, like, right? And so in that case, then you will lose your parent state, and we'll essentially rerun Compose for the whole hierarchy. And so that's like a little bit more aggressive, but we, UX wise, we try and make it clear when that is required versus the kind of live edit bit isn't. And then there's like further than that, you can make even more changes, where then you basically you have to relaunch the whole app. You have to rebuild the whole app, and so like situations where you're changing things across multiple modules and introducing new classes and changing, like there's some things that we just can't do, and so then if you want to see those changes, you rebuild the app and relaunch that. And so there's kind of different tiers to the changes you make, and what we want to try and do is increase the number of changes that are in the happy path, but then make sure it's clear to the user when they're not in the happy path, and they can do the slower thing at that point.
I suppose you've partially covered this, but like specifically what I'm curious about is like how hard would it have been to do with views, or would that be even possible at all, like to be this smart and this careful? Because I guess like apply changes was somewhat trying to figure out what had changed, but I don't remember the details, but I remember it was doing something with dynamic class loader and pushing partial APKs to the device as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That I believe you're thinking about instant run.
Oh, okay.
Apply changes is a lot more conservative. It actually builds the APK, So like we would a little history of it. It would run first time you run. It will have we will compute a checksum of the content of your APK, and then the next time you do an apply changes, we will also build. So it eliminate a lot of these weird hacks and black magic we had to
Mm.
do within Gradle. And once we diff those APK, we'll figure out which DEX file has changed. And we're not doing the live edit thing, but we're sending the diffs, the DEX diff over to
Mm.
the device. And we relied on Art to tell us when to reject it. The problem with that is there are a lot of things that the Art VM just cannot do. It will reject like if you change number of variables in a signature in a function signature and stuff like that. That worked pretty well for Java, but it's really limiting, should I say, in the Kotlin world where it just is generating a lot of code. Like signature and lambda get changed without you knowing. That's one of the biggest complaint we had with apply changes is that once you start using it in Kotlin, it tells you a slew of a lot of function signature change in this helper lambda class here and there, and there's just no way to know. It becomes really unpredictable, and that's why we want to focus on a solution that does not rely on this kind of technology to do to support a fast iterative development within Compose.
Well, the what I kind of talked about earlier around the programming model is pretty important as well. So with views, there's not really a good way to know what code needs to run in order to update the view to reflect the new code that you just wrote. That's like not really a clear operation. Like and you can end up with a lot of stuff where you edit some code and then yeah, the code's edited, but like that was supposed to run and it didn't run. And so now you have to figure out, well, how do we make it run so that the new state's reflected and stuff like that. And so the programming model of Compose kind of allows us to avoid that whole class of issue where, because you're writing in a declarative style, like the function itself is the thing we need to run. Like that kind of tells us like that reproduces what we think of as the up-to-date version of the hierarchy, and whatever differences are there, it's the runtime's job to figure out how to go from the current state into that state. And so because of that, these technologies end up being very compatible with this whole notion of like live edit, live changes being reflected.
So yeah, I guess it's a happy coincidence that Compose is also like change minimizing and oriented to understanding what's changing and only updating the stuff that needs to be updated. That definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean the two technologies end up working together quite well. Where there's the technology of getting the changes on the device, and then there's the technology of having basically this whole toolkit that is built to do the transition from one state to another state for you, and so this kind of helps us get there.
Out of curiosity, I don't know if this question even makes any sense, but out of curiosity, how much of this is similar, if you know, to the way, for example, Flutter handles hot reload or React for that matter? Do they have similar approaches in their similar functionality, or is it an entirely different thing because they work in a substantially different way?
Alan, do you want to? You looked like you're about to start.
I don't know enough about Flutter or the other technology, unfortunately. So I don't know. But I would think that it is kind of a different problem. We are looking at a different language for once is that Kotlin it's a compile language, so not a lot of people have done a full like live update for compile language. I know there is like small talk and stuff like that, but for a really large compile language with type inferencing, I don't think that has been done. And on the UI side, I guess Leland can talk a little bit more about like how things are withdrawn and stuff. So all that has to go together, and I'm not sure if those two other technology does this.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some differences. I think depending on how high level you look at it, it starts to look similar, or like even the implementation kind of looks similar. I mean, pretty big difference is just that like both JavaScript and Dart have interpreters, and Kotlin doesn't, and so that's kind of a big limiting factor right there, and one of the reasons why this is taking us a while, right? It's because like if we had an interpreter, it'd be a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one aspect of just like the quick build iteration speed, that makes a big impact there. When it comes to actually like reflecting the changes in the runtime, there are some interesting differences there too. So like React and Flutter both kind of use what's kind of labeled as a virtual DOM approach, where there's essentially a hierarchy of objects that are lightweight and sort of describe the hierarchy as is, and then you run these functions which then return a new sort of piece of that hierarchy, and then you diff the two. What's nice about that is that the code can change that, and you just produce a different little piece, and then the diff works the same as it always has. And so it's a little bit easier to kind of accomplish this in those toolkits. What we're doing, like the way Compose works, instead of using a virtual DOM, we actually generate specific instructions around the code that you write to kind of make the actual code executed is sort of like the hierarchy, if you will. And because we're doing that, this is kind of what I meant earlier when our approach sort of actively sabotages like the way live edit wants to work, right? Like we kind of do all this code assuming that the code won't change from under us. And once it does change, there's all these assumptions in the runtime that like sort of fall down. And so we kind of had to build a way for us to like sort of tell the runtime, like, hey, once you enter this function, forget what you thought you knew about the structure of this thing. It's going to be different this time. And so it's not that it like wasn't possible. It's just that like we had a few extra steps that we had to go through. And for those other toolkits, the runtime is like sort of, whether it's a new piece of code or an old piece of code that kind of generated this little virtual DOM description, it doesn't care. It's going to go through the same diff algorithm either way. And so that kind of helps. That said, I didn't implement those things. So there might be other issues, that are really complicated that I'm not thinking about that they had to tackle that we didn't. So, I don't know.
Aren't there always? Should we start taking some questions from the Slido? I'm gonna share my screen right now so everyone can see them. As a reminder, if you want to, if you folks from the audience want us to cover something, just put your question in the Slido. If you see a question that you're interested in, upvote it so we know how to prioritize them. I think we can probably start with Fabio's question, which is, if I remember correctly, using live edit with the previews is slower than when using it on devices or emulator. Can you explain why? And I would add, is that even the case?
I guess I could start. It's a tough question. I can see why this is happening often for a lot of people. Let's go back to kind of what is live edit and what is
this is
preview.
Philosophical.
It a little bit. In that we decided kind of we're not going to do the full live edit implementation for preview. We think that, preview, should be used in a different stage of development. It should be something that you use when you don't have the full running application. So you want to preview something, a small part of your application, you would want to use preview. Where live edit on device or emulator, it should be a fast iterative cycles for you when you have the full application or you want to modify the full application. And because of this, the two implementation diverge a lot. The preview rendering system is actually, we have our own layout lib to kind of do rendering. And on Android devices, obviously, we relied on Art and all the runtime. So I can see that if you're doing a small change on a really big preview, it would feel a lot slower because we don't leverage a lot of the built-in Android magic that we added to the runtime. And I think that's where kind of this question or this feeling is coming from, is that people might be using a really big preview where, it's probably a good time to move on to the device by then. And that's what I think the difference in performance is, the layout library handling really big preview versus an Android device, which is dedicated to handling really big redraws. Leland, you have any other say?
Just to clarify, when you say big, you mean, for example, a whole screen or a big part of the screen, right?
When I say big, I mean complex. It's
Okay.
not really the size of what it needs to redraw. It's number of classes it needs to load and number of compose, widget that you are triggering. That adds up to be something really big.
Yeah. So something I'll add here is there's also been some recent performance improvements to preview, which this question may or may not be asking from pre or post those improvements. Basically, the investigations that we've done with live edit have brought kind of some pretty clever ways for us to compile some changes that you've made to specific things. And so if you edit just the body of a function, for instance, and you don't change anything else, we can have really, really quick rebuilds. And preview is now taking advantage of that. Some of that technology where it wasn't before. And so it may be faster now than maybe you're thinking. But then on top of that, there's the things that Alan mentions, there after that point, they go down pretty different paths. So preview is run on your machine using layout lib, and it's really intended to create a snapshot of your UI after first load. It's not really a running version of the UI. Whereas when it's running on your device, it's kind of a live thing. And so a lot of the kind of interesting magical bits of how live edit works, which is where we're kind of patching and refreshing a live version of the application. A preview does a full, it's an initial composition every time. So it doesn't attempt to update just part of the hierarchy. And so if you've got a big UI and you're making a small change, in the emulator case using live edit, you're just running a small recomposition in that little part. Whereas with preview, you would be refreshing the entire thing. And so that can account for some of those differences.
So what they hear is use an emulator with live edit instead of preview.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's what Alan said kind of around different stages of development is it's also different styles. If I was working on a design library or something, and I'm thinking component at a time, the preview can be really useful, and it can help me display lots of different states for that one little thing. And it's kind of a different way to approach editing that thing. But if I'm working on an app where like I'm thinking of the whole screen kind of at once and I'm making changes to that screen, yeah, then for me, that's a situation where live edit on an emulator is really going to be a much better sort of like iterative experience for me.
Yeah, just before Diego kills me, yes. But what like, jokes aside, it's very true that they are different things for different use cases, especially for, I'm thinking if I need to work on a animation, I most likely want to use the preview, because then I can use the interactive preview and I can go through the timeline of the animation. I can scrub it by hand. I can check that everything works the way I want. Whereas it's more kind of like unit versus integration testing in a way, right?
That's something that I was thinking about. I mean, it feels like there are two tools for two different level of granularity. You know, the idea that if you're building just one composable and you have like 5 people and then you can build 5 composables at the time, they're going to be using preview, because there is not a screen where you're going to use the composable right now, but you have 5 people that you want to parallelize the development. So yeah, I like the fact that for two scenarios you have two tools. There is the effort to build two different tools for two different use cases, and I think that's great.
Well, also, I mean, one of the nice things is, about preview is that you can configure it so that you're kind of testing multiple environments at the same time. So you can have, you know, a small screen and large screen, and you can have different locales. You know, a lot of times, like, you want to see, like, okay, what does this look like in Chinese and German? You know, they end up with like very different text layouts, like, because of just the way the languages work. And so these are like types of things where when you use kind of preview to like its full power, it can be a lot more productive, just because you can't really like configure an emulator to show you all of that at the same time.
I also think another advantage of previews is if you are consistent in the way you use them and you declare them, they kind of work as living documentation of what you're building. So you don't have to say, oh, wait, is this composable the one that does that spec or that other spec? You can, like, you open the file and Studio by default shows you the code and the preview next one to the other, and you can see, oh, okay, this is that, and this looks like this. And if you want to play around with it, you can make it interactive. If it's a button, you can see how it looks. Like, all those things are very useful, and it's kind of a way to automating having visual documentation of your code, which is pretty valuable. Second question. We talk about Flutter again. Any plans for partial recompositions for previews like Flutter does? I guess we have partly touched upon this already. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to what we covered before.
Yeah, I feel like this person is asking about go back to the first screen. If you have notion of multiple screens in your preview, you're probably using preview for something too big.
Yeah,
and in this case, like live edit is what you should be using here, and in that case, there is partial recomposition and that type of thing.
Cool. Next, Material 3's window size class is not supported in composable previews. Have you got any feedback regarding that, and what does the team think for its support? Not even sure you're the right people to ask this to, but
yeah, I mean, one of the things I noticed is that a lot of these questions are around preview, and live edit is like kind of the class of features that are not in preview. There are a class of problems like this one where because of preview running using like layout lib and with limited functionality, like you kind of HTTP requests and like disk loads and stuff like that, and the full Android environment is sort of not available. There are certain implementations that end up being it's not that it's not possible, it's that it won't really work out of the box. It requires extra work to get those things to kind of work in preview. I have heard of this particular issue with Windows size class. I don't know what plans are in place, if any. So I can't really speak to that.
Maybe we need to get, is it Guillaume working on that? Or whoever's working on layout lib, or maybe Diego, I don't know. Someone that knows more about this, probably.
I mean, I know that you can configure previews to work with various different window size classes, but I think there's something about the implementation of that like if you reference it directly, it's not.
I think it's worth pointing out that at this point, like previews are essentially running a part of Android that has been ported to run into Studio on the JVM. So you're not running the whole operating system, as Leland said. It's a very vertical slice of things that have been implemented. And as soon as you touch something that is not supported, that is not like implemented, then what happens really is probably nothing. Hopefully nothing. They might break the preview if something goes catastrophically wrong. I haven't seen that happening, but it might be that like you're I think you're using the wrong tool if that's what you're trying to do. Because if you want to have something that takes in and I'm looking at the other questions we have, like if you're trying to put a view model into a preview, you're probably trying to use a unit test to test the entire system, and that's probably not the right tool to begin with. So even if it were made to work at some point, it would still probably not be the right thing to be using. The other questions are all on the same vein of, ripples look weird, view models don't work, and sometimes clicks don't work fine. It all goes back to that. I think the only one about click offsets, that might just be some density translation issue. I don't know, between Swing and the fake Android world that runs the previews. So I would say, especially on the latter, it's probably worth finding a bug, and then hopefully it's going to be fixed. If you have any other questions specifically on live edit, just put them in the Slido. And we're going to
also, I think it might be important to spell out for people, like when we're talking about live edit, we're specifically in this case not talking about preview, and so there might be situations where you think you've tried live edit, but maybe you haven't. And so currently, like Alan, do you want to state currently where you can find live edit and in what features or in what versions of Android Studio and things like that?
Yeah, so right now, if you're using Android Studio Canaries, you should have an option in the settings menu. If you can search live edit, it should be there. You can enable it in different ways. And I believe it's under editor and then live edit. There are two modes. There's the automatic mode, which I think it was the one that was demoed in IO, where when you type, it will automatically updates, when we feel you have enough keystroke, and when the system is not too busy. There's also another mode that we recently added. It's called the manual mode. In that case, we don't always update as you type, and you have to manually kind of trigger it. The settings it depends on your OS. You can look at the setting page and tells you. I believe it's Control S for OSs that have Control, and Command S for Mac, which kind of ties into the whole save. Like, I don't know if people still do save in IntelliJ or Android Studio.
So I don't know why they would, but
for me it's just muscle memory. Like I write some code and then I hit Command S, and it's just like my brain won't let me stop. But
That
I
makes two of us, Leland. I feel you so much. It's like it's happening. It's happening constantly. Every editor
Yeah,
now
yeah.
has the autosave, and I'm like, my thumb is sore. Still can't actually stop doing it. Like,
I
man,
blame
I hate this
Eclipse.
thing so much.
I,
And why should I mean, like, self-preservation should prevail at some point. Nope, no muscle memory.
yeah.
It's all
I wonder if we have
Eclipse's fault.
analytics on how many people like unnecessarily press Command S like
I'm pretty sure that if
all
I
the
ask
time.
Adi, some number will pop up from Android Studio and IntelliJ. There are tracking somewhere. There's tracking for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just I guess this is
So
a time for a PSA. You do not need to save files in IntelliJ and Android Studio. It does it automatically. It's not Eclipse. You don't need to save the stuff manually.
But if you want to use live edit with manual mode, then keep doing it because it'll
Yes.
come in handy, And, yeah.
or you can be like me. I always randomly have a colon and a W for those who know what that is. Anyways,
Yeah.
for if you don't like using canaries, I know Canary does not have a big population. We plan to make live edit available as an experimental feature in Flamingo. So you would have to wait for the latest, the beta version or the stable version of Flamingo, and still have to kind of manually go into the setting and enable live edit. If you don't like the Canary versions.
Yeah, and this is just to kind of pile on to the way we're approaching live edit, which is, very conservatively. We want to make sure that we don't kind of burn users' trust in the feature, and we want to make sure that it's ready to kind of go stable, but when it is going stable, and so that's why there's still some things that we're working on getting just right. And actually, Fabio has another question in the Slido, which
Let me go back to
might be
the
worth answering.
Yeah, let me go back. Limitations to modifying function names, adding, removing functions, and more on apply changes side or compose side. Just curious.
Yeah, so this is this touches on some areas that are kind of like really important and stuff we're looking at. But again, this kind of is really around us being conservative and making sure that we don't erode user trust here. And so there are a lot of cases where adding a function or modifying a function name and things like that can be handled just fine. However, there's also some cases where we end up doing the wrong thing. And so I would like us to enable this for the cases where we know we can do the right thing. But this is just kind of an active area of exploration, is like making sure that we get that right. But it's an important one, I think.
So
Alan,
I like that. I like for on the device. So I believe, if I remember correctly, starting from API 28, Art actually have the capability to add function to an existing running application. It will run it in a de-optimized mode. So technically, for apply changes, you could add function right now if you have a newer Android device. The kind of only caveat is it cannot delete function. Deleting is something it's not, even supported in Art. So if you if you change your parameter of a function and you hit apply changes, it actually needs to do a remove and an add. So that's why it does not support kind of renaming. Like changing signature, but you could potentially add function. And like Leland said, for Compose or Live Edit, we are actively kind of researching it. The technology is there. It's just that there are cases where it might behave slightly different. I was told not to make any promises publicly, so we are making we are researching it. Leland's always bugging me about it. So we are looking, in future releases that might come.
Yeah, and for those that like maybe it's not clear, like there are some situations where like once you add a function, if you think about it, like then all of a sudden that function is now like one of the eligible functions for every call site in your entire app. Assuming it's a public function, and so you might not have been thinking about it that way, but as soon as you added that function, you might have changed behavior of a bunch of other things, and so there's a lot of like basically that's usually not the case, but it can be the case, and because it can be the case, we want to make sure that like we don't create a situation where you're not sure if you trust the result that you see on screen, and so those are that's kind of the little detail there that a lot of people don't see immediately, is that once you add a function, it is one of the things that could have been resolved as the function you're calling for every other call site. And because Kotlin has a lot of like calling conventions in Kotlin, can have a lot of overloads because of different receiver scopes and all these things. And so there's a lot of eligible functions for every call site that you need to contend with. And so that's kind of what we're being careful about.
While we wait to see if anyone else has other questions, I have another one, which is Live Edit is supported on API 30 and up on the device side, right?
Yes.
Is there any functionality that is further restricted to newer versions of the API, or everything works from 30 and up?
Well, there's also the Compose version, which you need to worry about. So we were just kind of talking about this, but so like there's doing live edit required us to make some capabilities in the runtime and Compose runtime in order to do it properly. And so you have to at least have those things available. But even then, there's like, there's kind of new functionality that we keep adding as we refine it. And so it's not entirely clear whenever this goes stable what the minimum version of Compose will be. Obviously, we want it to be as low as possible, but it may be the most recent stable release or something like that because of some bug fixes or API changes that we made.
Yeah, to further add to Leland's point out, we kind of set a renewable version recently. Obviously, that's bound to change, and Android Studio will tell you that in order to have a good live edit experience, we actually need all these newly added goodies in the Compose runtime for you to have a very good experience on it. So we have added checks right now to make sure this is the case.
And as this will keep evolving, and there might be it might be needing new stuff in the Android runtime or in Compose, then the TLDR is keep up to date as much as you can so that you get all the best bits.
Yeah, I mean we don't raise the minimum version just cause, but yeah, if there's something that's broken and we fix it, then there's not much else that we can do.
Yeah, but you don't just get live edit, you also get a bunch of other awesome stuff. Like there's many reasons, one of which is also live edit. I think I'm out of questions. Ivan, do you have questions?
So it's more like brain picking your brain about this amount of misunderstanding between live edit and preview that I witnessed tonight, or at least that was part of the whole Slido situation a few minutes ago. What do you think is happening here? Why people are so confused about which is what, which is apply changes, which is was like why there is so much confusion about all these features that over time, we are adding to Android Studio to Compose. It feels like, there is a need for deeper understanding of what does what, right? I don't know if I'm clear with my late evening English.
No, I get it. I get the question. I think. I mean, one kind of big thing, which is that preview is like a stable feature. It's in Android Studio and all channels, and live edit isn't. And so if you're not using the Canary channel, then it's like, oh well, they must be talking about some feature in Studio. No, it must be preview. So there's I think some natural confusion there just because live edit isn't stable yet. I think another aspect is that we whenever we started using the live edit build pipeline for preview, I think we kind of marketed it to a degree as live edit in preview, and there's kind of more to live edit than just the build pipeline, and so that some of that confusion I think might have been self-inflicted to a degree.
Yeah, I also would like to add, it's also the timing. Timing has a little to do with it. Like Leland said, kind of compose and preview came out, in a closer time than compose and live edit, and people already have a mental image of what fast iteration would be. It's with preview, and that kind of ingrained in a lot of developers' head. Another thing I found it just when we were doing user study, the word preview, it's so overloaded that it actually create confusion. A lot of time people would say, oh yeah, I previewed my app and it didn't work. And that's where the confusion comes from. How did you preview it? Did you run it and look at it like the action of preview in your application, or did you use the feature preview? Or exists another feature we kind of didn't really mention here. It's you can actually deploy a preview to device. So all that
gets confusing very quickly, my friend.
It's worse. You can deploy the preview and use live edit on the deployed preview.
Yeah, that's a bit meta, but I get it. But
yeah, well, then there's also live literals as well.
It feels like there is like a marketing issue. You have a marketing problem here.
Well, we'll take that feedback and see if we can do something about it.
The most diplomatic answer.
Well, come on. I mean, it's the PG-13 stream, apparently.
When? Since when?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying. But it's no, because it's probably the Canary thing is it's a fact because I'm a IntelliJ person, okay? So I'm like the last person on earth to get the feature that we are talking about, because it's gonna take me like 2 years probably. But no, jokes aside, the Canary part is the deal breaker, right? Because maybe you want to be unstable because the documentation refers to stable. Canary is like, living on the edge and then you start wondering, okay, but I'm working with this project. I don't know if the Canary starts acting up, then I need to, still roll back or whatever, just close and use Toolbox to launch the stable. At this point, I want to be unstable because I want to save time. So there is a lot. I see where this is coming from. There is a lot of pushback on, I want to take variables away from my environment and I want to use something that is a bit more stable. but on the same side, on the other side, Sebastiano says use the latest stuff because it's a lot of fun. And
we need the bug reports.
and yeah,
Yeah.
that's job security for you, because now you need to fix shit.
I don't fix anything. I break things, man. You should know it by now.
Usually break stuff. But actually, I feel it's a legit concern. You don't get a lot of Canary people on Canary, because there is always like, maybe I don't need the latest stuff. I want to be a bit safer. I need to work. I want the tooling to be a bit more.
And to a degree, that's working as intended, right? I mean, the Canary channel, there are rough edges, and it means that like, it's great if you're wanting to just try out some features and and then give us feedback on that. Like, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, these are people who have a job to do. They're writing code and they're trying to get stuff done. And when the tooling gets in your way, that's incredibly frustrating. And so we have to be very careful about what graduates to stable. And it should be a very high bar to ensure that we don't block people from getting their work done. We want to do the opposite. We want to make it so that they get their work done faster. That's the goal. But we have to make sure that we do one without the other. And that just takes some time. Yeah.
So this is a very so I'm actually I don't want to sound like a jerk, okay? But I'm but I mean it's inevitable. It's inevitable, okay? Because I say that I want to sound like a jerk, so it's inevitable. Was there a time where people in your team, on your side of the fence, okay, considering devs here and you on the other side, there was a discussion about, this could be a plugin, so we don't need to ship the whole Android Studio, so we can ship a plugin that just adds a functionality. So if something goes south, I disable the plugin, I wait a couple of days, Alan does his thing, a new version comes out, and I update the plugin.
So I'm waiting for the point where you sound like a jerk. I don't know.
Yeah, same.
Sounds like a reasonable piece of feedback. But Alan, do you want to take this one?
Where's the plugin?
No. But
I had to make you sound like a jerk. Otherwise, your whole premise wouldn't stand out.
Where this thing is coming from, right? Because we had a lot of discussion, even with Chris in the past, that Android Studio, there's a lot of integration effort to actually create Android Studio from IntelliJ and IntelliJ from Android Studio. And at some point I was like, why don't we just put this thing in a plugin and fuck it? So did it ever happen? I'm curious about this conversation. This discussion ever happened?
Well, I can tell you this discussion happened, and it happens very often. But I think I
see the red dot from the sniper, so I see. So careful, because there's a lot of windows there. That's a bad spot for you, my friend.
But what you described, like Leland said, is not unreasonable, right? Like, it's probably the first thing that people comes to people's mind, something like this. But does not mean it solves some problem, but does not solve all the problem, and it's going to introduce more problem as well. Like, there's the whole versioning and discrepancy between a lot of the plugin. Like, I've been dealing with a lot of them. Like, right now, Live Edit depends on the Kotlin plugin, right? So there's also versioning with the Kotlin plugin. Now I have to deal with that, and there's code within Live Edit that has to deal with that, and there's also now Compose, so we have to deal with different versions of Compose. So I believe it solves some problem, but it also introduced other problems. And just that, in terms of Live Edit, that's something we could think about, but I don't feel this is at a point that it outweighs. The line is blurred, but it is not obvious that we should be taking this path. That's my take on it. But like I mentioned before, we have that discussion almost every year. That every time we get around, somebody asks this question, And
There are a lot of pieces. I mean, now that you mention it, there are a lot of pieces involved. I mean, it's not just, oh yeah, we build a plugin and YOLO, but there is there is a lot of stuff that you need to work with. So
Yeah.
like for example, I could give this like argument in that, you know, live edit works so fast right now. It's because we relied on the IDE to compile for us. Let's take a step back. So when you build your application, you are actually invoking Gradle, and Gradle talks to the Kotlin daemon, and it does the compiling for you. So when in live edit, we would ask the IDE to compile. The reason is, in order for the Kotlin compiler to generate any code, it needs to do two things. It needs to run the analysis and type analysis. It does all these things to understand your code, and it does this pass to generate code. For composable for Compose project, it used a new kind of backend, new IO backend. So there's two steps. The first step, actually, funny thing is, it's always done within the IDE. It continuously monitor your changes and update an analysis, and that's why it knows how to autocomplete, or like it tells you you're calling a wrong function. So we leverage a lot of that. We use that analysis and generate code from that analysis. So we're really tied into the IDE. So just that part is going to be a nightmare to kind of separate the close integration needed toward how this function works. So that's just one thing, and we haven't even tried to move into the plugin.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all trade-offs, right? But there's obvious good reasons for why that would be nice, right? I mean, there's also, you know, Compose for desktop means that some of the live edit technology could be used for that as well, which you know, is definitely really interesting. And in that case, there's going to be a lot more people using something other than Android Studio to work with Compose, and so it's hard, but yes, the conversation happens, right? Is the answer.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where there is a logical high-level improvement that has so many repercussions on the low-level implementation that makes it almost impossible.
Yeah, but I mean, I think with time, you know, it's a question that we should come back to and reassess, you know, over time. But you know, a big part of our focus right now is just to make it work well, right?
But Alan was saying it's a question that gets asked every year, and I guess next year I'm gonna be the one asking it. Do we take turns, or
Coin flip?
I don't know. I'm just trying to be helpful here. Okay, given we have about 5 minutes left and we are out of questions on the slide, Leland, Alan, if there's anything else that you want to talk about, now is the time. Otherwise, we can start wrapping up the stream.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're close out of time. I was hoping that we would get to play around with it a little bit, but
I mean, we can do it
yeah,
quickly.
People can do that themselves, I guess.
I'm sharing the screen. Let's change something somewhere. Why not? What could possibly go wrong?
I like everything is scripted. Everything is prepared ahead of time.
Yes,
sure.
Very scripted and very prepared.
Yeah, was the project at least building 15 minutes ago?
It was not an hour ago. Half an hour ago it was.
Okay, fair enough.
So
what are we changing?
I need to remember what's the name.
It might be nice to change something on screen, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, where's this little notification thing?
Yeah. Should be this one. Let me see.
And so just to point out to folks, right? So if you look in the top right corner of where the emulator window is, there's there's a little live edit thing with a check mark, and so
So-
the green check mark, is kind of telling you you're in a good state. And as you change things, that will potentially change to other things, which will kind of let you know what's going on. And maybe we'll see that.
Okay,
And if you're using this on a device, this is actually an emulator. It's probably easy to stream an emulator. But if you're on a device, that icon goes to the code button on the top right of your editor plane.
So I'm gonna start by adding some padding because everyone likes padding, and also sounds like a safe bet. He said famous last wordingly.
Yeah. So
where are you adding it?
I am theoretically adding it to the card.
So now hit. I'm just guessing here, but hit Command S. There it goes.
I'm not saving. I'm updating.
Yeah. So in this case, I think the default mode is manual mode.
Right.
And so if you wanted to change
Make
that,
it
we can.
automatic.
Yeah.
Make it super automatic. Okay. So now add more padding.
Yeah.
Sebastian.
10.
Change that to 10.
Boom.
Okay, but so this is something that you can get with live literal as well, right? We are changing a number, something.
Right. Although adding the padding modifier wouldn't have, but you
Fair
could,
enough.
You can remove the padding, and then that works.
Oh, nice. Oh, it's actually.
You could now do background color or something if you want, and you could add composables and insert texts and change it from column to row, and you can really change anything.
It's not changing the background.
No, it's changing, but it's below.
Yeah, you've got another background that's overriding.
Yeah, if you look at the corners, right, there is some yellow in the corner.
Right.
I think the card is messed up. But can you add like a text?
Boom. There you go.
Nice. Can you like a text composable, like line 255? Can you put like a text there? I want to see if something happened.
Yep.
Oh, nice. This is good. This is this is so cool. Oh, nice. Okay.
You can put
Much
emojis.
support, yo. I mean, this is great. I mean, I'm done. That's everything that I need. So this is the app that is running on the phones, right? Sebastian, you can click around. It's not the preview.
Correct.
This is the actual app.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And I can also
and you could even if you added a state, like a counter or something, and then a button to increment the state or something like that. That's always a good demo.
So.
And I just want to point out, so where you are right now, you look at the live edit thing, and there's a little pause icon, right? And so that's indicating that basically you've changed some stuff, but it's not really compilable, so it's not really in a state where it can update something. But now it is. So now it's back to the green check mark, and then once it's in a compiling state, then it'll indicate it while it's updating. It'll have like a little spinner, and then once it's done, it'll be a green check mark.
So it's refraining from just throwing errors at you because you are in the middle of typing, basically, right? It's smart enough to be smart.
Yeah,
it's actually reasonable.
Right.
Which is something that did happen sometimes with live edit of literals, right? Where you would be editing something and then the app would crash because it wouldn't compile.
Yeah, I remember something like that. Okay, so you click and the thing moves. So if you navigate back.
Yeah, well,
it's fine because I declared it here.
That's just normal behavior. But so if like for instance, if you started changing the text more to add some text there, and you increment the count before you do it, the count will stay basically, if that makes sense.
Okay.
You mean in here?
So click something there.
Yeah. So you can change the text here, and it's recomposing the button, but not the count, for instance.
I mean, we need more exclamation marks.
I mean,
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say he's a disturbed person. I mean, why do you need this? I mean, it's 8 in the evening. I mean, people want to go. I mean, why? What are you doing? It was a legit demo. Okay, it was good. Even it was happy. I mean, okay.
Why doesn't it work?
I don't know, because you can't do your job. You're just
pretending.
pretending. That's the thing. It's just you are the
Count
living proof
doesn't
of
have a
faking.
return.
And
There you go. Do you like
Well,
Unit?
Then you go what? You're printing confident unit. Then you go what?
So if you
It's
did
printing was
build-
returning from the repeater. It's not so. Leland,
string and
I apologize for this. I mean, it was perfect. It was brilliant until 2 minutes ago, and then this. I mean, yeah. Sorry, sorry everybody. I'm gonna just cut this off the VOD. It's never gonna go live. This anyway. I love this because this is actually something that you can work with. So I don't see any major shortcoming, and because we added a composable with a state, and it's working. I mean, as long as Sebastiano doesn't touch it, it's working. Okay. Oh, this is cool. This is cool. I give you that.
This is good functionality, man. Must have.
It's okay.
Woo!
Pasta.
You wanted a demo, you got a demo. Come on.
Yeah. They were like perfect. Nice.
Okay,
Nice.
now you can do the wrap up. I've had my exclamation marks.
No, I'm very happy. I'm very happy, and I look forward to more development for live edit, because this is something that I want to use. So when I'm back to my pet project, I want to use this stuff. Thank you for joining us. It was intense. Sorry, we are short of time today, so we need to keep it. We need to keep it short. Everybody, thank you for the support at home. Remember that you can support us if you have Amazon Prime. You can buy the T-shirt on the store, and you can join the Telegram group if you want. When we are not online live streaming, we still are on Telegram. If you want to join the Discord server, just check our tiers to become a subscriber on Coffee. And yeah, just thank you for being with us. If you're watching this on YouTube, of course, click like and subscribe. Every link that we shared in the chat is going to be in the link description, in the video description. And yeah, that's it.
So we will see you next week with someone you've seen before here, Ramangi. We're going to be talking about his new library for embedding images into runs of text and just putting the text around them, which is super cool. I haven't had time to look at it yet, but at this point I've decided I'm going to just let Roman explain it to me live, which sounds like a good approach.
Perfect.
Have a great one, everyone.
Beautiful people.
Yeah.
Have a
thanks
nice
for having
evening.
us.
Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Ciao, ciao.